While I was 9 months pregnant, my husband ditched me to celebrate at my sister's lavish wedding. So I got. Even I'm 35 years old. I've been married for 7 years. My husband's name is Andrew. He's 39. We have a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm currently 7 months pregnant. The main reason I'm writing here is that I just need someone to listen to me. My husband has always been close to his family, and when we were dating, that didn't bother me. His family was always nice to me. But soon after the wedding, I realized just how close he was to his mother and sister, as if they had their own private club. It didn't affect our marriage directly, so I just rolled my eyes when they had their little get-togethers. It wasn't aimed at me, so I ignored it. At events or parties, they usually sat together and criticized others. At first, they tried to involve me in their gossip, but I'm not a fan of idle talk, so I kept my distance. They didn't make things uncomfortable for me, and I didn't bother them either. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law never warmed up to me, and they kept their distance. I avoided them too. I can't stand talking behind people's backs and then smiling to their face. When I got pregnant with our first child, I stopped going to my mother-in-law's house, partly to distance myself, and partly because both she and my sister-in-law were toxic. My husband was kind and caring, but God knows what happened to him when he was around them. He became a different person. At home, he was respectful and attentive, so I didn't mind the few hours he spent with them on weekends. I gave him that space. When our daughter Sarah turned 3, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law tried to turn her against me, saying, "Mom is bad." But Sarah pushed back. She cried and said, "Mom is good." Then she came home and told me about it. My husband laughed and said they were probably just teasing her. But I knew their true intentions. From that moment, I never left my daughter alone with those cruel women again. Things got worse last year when my sister-in-law started dating a wealthy businessman from Scotland. She was over the moon about landing a man like that, but what shocked me was how excited my husband was about it. For context, my father-in-law has been retired for years and lives in a countryside house. I've only met him a few times, and unlike the others, he doesn't tolerate nonsense. Probably why he moved away for peace. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law are both unemployed and live off the rent from one of the family's apartments and money from the father-in-law. My husband also gives part of his salary to his mom. I've always been financially independent, so I didn't mind him helping her. Back to the main point, ever since my sister-in-law started dating this rich man, her attitude changed for the worse. She acted like a princess. At family gatherings, she flaunted the expensive gifts from her boyfriend. My mother-in-law was floating in the clouds too, giggling with her daughter like they were teenagers. Their behavior annoyed me, and it clearly showed on my face. It wasn't jealousy. Why would I be? The problem was that since they used to live on a tight budget and had nothing to brag about, they stayed quiet. But now, with this love in their life, they started subtly mocking me, accusing me of being jealous. They never said it directly, but their gestures and some comments from relatives made it clear. Soon after, I got pregnant with my second child. Thank God. It gave me another excuse to avoid them. Andrew insisted I let Sarah spend time with them alone, but even Sarah refused. She's only 5, but she already wants nothing to do with them. I know some might think I turned her against them, but believe me, kids can sense love and fakeness better than adults. My first pregnancy was difficult. I was on bed rest. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law never once visited me. This second pregnancy has been easier, but now they come by often, not to check on me, but to show off their new jewelry, designer clothes, or $1,000 bags. My sister-in-law was going crazy bragging about how rich her boyfriend is and how they're planning a lavish wedding in Scotland. I'd just smile politely and think to myself, good for you. A week ago, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law suddenly came over. They started praising me. My sister-in-law said she loved the apple pie and donuts I once baked. Instead of being happy, I got suspicious. I asked why they suddenly remembered desserts I made years ago. They looked flustered that I skipped the pleasantries and got straight to the point. Turns out she missed my apple pie and said no restaurant could make it like I do. So, they wanted me to bake one. I thanked them, but said I wasn't feeling well. Baking takes energy I don't have while pregnant and taking care of a child. They refused to accept no and insisted. I finally gave in and said I'd try to bake it when I felt better. For the first time since my wedding, my sister-in-law hugged me and said she'd pick it up on Sunday. I didn't ask why Sunday. Honestly, I wasn't planning to bake anything. I just wanted to avoid a conflict. By midweek, I was so exhausted from pregnancy and caring for Sarah that I completely forgot about that conversation. On Friday night during dinner, Andrew said he'd be busy over the weekend because Sunday was the dinner where his sister would introduce her boyfriend's family. That's when it all clicked. The sudden compliments, the pie request. Why Sunday? Yeah, I know I make the best apple pie you'll ever taste. But that doesn't mean I'm going to fall for this trap. I told Andrew about their visit and request. He said the boyfriend and his Scottish family had a sweet tooth and had heard a lot about American apple pie. His sister bragged that she makes the best apple pie in the world and promised to serve it at the dinner. I was stunned. I told Andrew there's no way I'm baking anything just so someone else could take the credit. And more than that, I wasn't even invited to this dinner. He said that since I'm in my 7th month, his mom thought I'd be uncomfortable in front of guests, so they decided not to invite me. Even if her intentions were good, they weren't. Why didn't she mention this when asking for the dessert? Andrew just shrugged and said he didn't know. On Saturday, he left to pick up his dad and said he'd be back only Sunday evening after the dinner. Of course, I wanted to scream and fight with him, but I chose peace. Nothing I said would stop him from attending. On Sunday, I turned off my phone and locked myself and Sarah in our room. I guessed his mom and sister would try to reach me, and when they couldn't, they'd leave voicemails. I ignored everything. Was I at peace? Number I knew they'd curse me for not helping them, but I was still glad I didn't give in. Monday morning, I turned on my phone. It was flooded with missed calls and voicemails. It started with begging and ended with curses. As soon as they saw I read the messages, my mother-in-law called. Oh God, that was the longest rant I've ever heard. I always knew her real face, but that day I heard her true venom. She blamed me for ruining the dinner and called me a witch. Turns out they were so sure I'd bake the pie that they didn't make or order any dessert. My sister-in-law wanted to impress her future in-laws with my pie, pretending it was hers. The guests left disappointed. And of course, I was the one blamed. While my mother-in-law cursed me out, I just pictured their miserable faces at that table. I thought, if it was such a big deal, why not order something from a restaurant? But again, not my problem. I told her that and hung up. Among the angry messages from her and my sister-in-law was one late message from Andrew. He said he wouldn't be home that night and would return Monday after work. When he finally came home, he was silent, but not angry. I tried to tell him what his mom had said, but he cut me off, saying he didn't want to get involved and that I was lucky he wasn't mad at me for embarrassing his family. He said I shouldn't expect him to take my side against his mother and sister. That's when I snapped. Their words didn't hurt me much because I knew who they were. But what the hell was Andrew doing? He should have stood up for me, especially since I wasn't even invited to the dinner. How could I be blamed for ruining an event I wasn't even part of? Since then, we haven't spoken. Neither of us has tried to fix things. Deep down, I feel like it's over. And honestly, I keep asking myself, did I really ruin their reputation by refusing their request? I don't know, guys. So, pause this video and drop a comment. Did the narrator really destroy the family's reputation? Update 1, hi everyone. It's been 2 months since my first post. I'm now 40 weeks pregnant and pretty much ready to give birth. After that whole incident, I realized I'd been way too patient with my husband. 2 weeks later, I had to go in for an ultrasound and Andrew came with me. On the way back, I tried to bring up what had happened, but he told me I needed to let it go and focus on my health. He was acting normal otherwise, and I took that as a good sign. Maybe he wasn't holding a grudge. But deep down, I felt something was off, like he was hiding something. And then, this morning, I woke up and saw Andrew packing his things. When I opened my eyes, I noticed he was trying to shove his formal suit into a bag. My heart dropped. I almost screamed, asking him why he was packing. He said he was flying to Scotland for his sister's wedding. I was speechless. What? When was this even decided? I bombarded him with questions. When was the date set? Why didn't anyone tell me? And most importantly, how could he leave me alone one day before my due date? Yes, my due date was the very next day. He did everything he could to dodge my questions or gave short, vague answers. I told him he couldn't just avoid me like that. I was angry, hurt, shocked, all at once. Can you even imagine? Your husband packing up and leaving you with a 5-year-old a day before you're supposed to give birth? I won't lie. I lost it. I grabbed his shoulder and demanded answers. He said the decision was last minute, that his sister's fiancé's relatives had insisted on this date, and that he couldn't do anything about it. Of course he could have. He could have just not gone. He chose not to stay. While we were arguing, the doorbell rang. Andrew ran to open it like he'd been expecting someone. It was his mother. She barged into the house, yelling at Andrew for being late. Then she dragged his bags out of the room and announced that he didn't need to finish packing. Anything he was missing could be bought in Scotland. That line hit me like a slap. It felt like she was mocking me. In that moment, I wanted to hit her. When she smirked at me, I knew it was already too late to stop Andrew or even bother fighting. So I went back to my room, threw the rest of his luggage into the living room, and locked the door. I could hear my mother-in-law screaming, cursing me out. Then they left. That's when everything started making sense. Andrew had been acting strange and secretive for a whole month. I thought he was just torn between me and his family. But the truth hurt, both emotionally and physically. I broke down sobbing. The chaos woke up my daughter, Sarah. She came to me, hugged me, and said everything would be okay, that I should be happy because we were about to meet the new baby. Her innocent words melted me. I hugged her tight, and we spent the day playing in bed. I tried to distract myself, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that Andrew had abandoned me in this state. I called my sister and asked her to stay with me the next day. I didn't know when labor would start, and I couldn't risk being alone again. I had to write this update today, because what happened is still suffocating me. Wish me an easy and peaceful delivery. Update 2. Hi, everyone. I know it's been a few months since my last update. First of all, I had a baby boy. That same day, not long after my last post, I logged into Facebook and saw that Andrew had happily posted pictures of himself and his family having a great time in Scotland. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I broke down crying. It was after midnight, Sarah was fast asleep, and I went into the bathroom to let it all out. I'd been keeping it together all day for her. I cried for almost an hour. I was on the verge of fainting when I suddenly realized my water had broken. I somehow dragged myself to the living room to call an ambulance. Everything after that is a blur. The next thing I remember is being in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. When I came to, I started calling out for Sarah. A nurse told me they had found her crying next to me. Since the house was empty, the paramedics had taken her with them. The poor girl was sitting up front with one of them. I was relieved she was safe. Shortly after we got to the hospital, I gave birth to my son. The nurse said they tried to contact my husband, but his phone was unreachable. My sister arrived early the next morning. She lives 200 kilometers away. When she heard what had happened, she scolded me for not calling her sooner. I told her I honestly thought I had another day. She also insisted that I cut ties with Andrew immediately. Since I was found in that state, alone, heavily pregnant, and unconscious, the hospital staff notified the police. Officers visited and asked if I'd been abused by my husband. I told them the truth. There was no physical abuse, but there was emotional and psychological neglect, and that his inaction had put 3 lives at risk: mine, our daughters, and our unborn sons. I still get chills thinking about what could have happened if I hadn't managed to call for help. Thank God we made it. 2 days later, I was discharged. By then, my parents had arrived. They live over 4,000 kilometers away. They were ready to sue Andrew and his family for the emotional damage I suffered during the pregnancy. While I was still in the hospital, they went to our house and packed up my things. I didn't want to stay with Andrew either. Who would? After everything. After I was discharged, I moved back to my hometown with my parents and sister. Almost a week after the birth, Andrew returned home. Judging by his Facebook activity, they'd extended their stay in Scotland after the wedding to travel and explore. I was stunned at how casually he was enjoying his vacation while I was giving birth. And he never called or texted, not even once. I didn't reach out either. I was too busy planning how to destroy his life and his family's. A week after he came back and found the house empty, he also found divorce papers and a notice from the police about the investigation. He panicked and called me over 100 times. Not going to lie, I enjoyed his frantic voicemails and begging messages. Then the calls from my mother-in-law started. She left message after message begging me to talk. I told my parents, and they called Andrew directly, asking him to come see us. He flew over that same day, me with his mother. My parents yelled at both of them for putting me through hell. They threatened to ruin their lives. Andrew begged to speak to me alone. He literally begged for forgiveness and to make things right. He started emotionally manipulating me, saying the baby needed a father, that I shouldn't take away their chance at a family. So I asked him, "Do you even know the gender of our second child?" He went silent. Our son was a week old, and his father didn't even know he had been born. Does a child really need that kind of father? His mother begged for forgiveness too, whining that a lawsuit would ruin their reputation with the new in-laws. The husband's family? I didn't care. I laughed at her pathetic excuses. Eventually, when they were asked to leave, they insisted on seeing the baby. but I didn't want them even looking at my children, not even their shadow touching them. My father kicked them out. Meanwhile, I contacted my sister-in-law's husband through social media. We had never met, so I introduced myself. To my surprise, he said he had already started suspecting something was off when I was excluded from the family dinner and wedding, all under the excuse of my pregnancy. I told him everything. He said he was shocked to learn that Andrew had partied in Scotland while I gave birth alone. He asked about my sister-in-law, and I told him the truth about her personality and the whole apple pie situation. Turns out my sister-in-law had been pretending to be a chef, and my mother-in-law backed up her lies, claiming they owned a restaurant chain. I exposed them. I told him the amazing cook couldn't even boil an egg. He called her a gold digger who only cared about his money. He promised to keep our conversation private. I told him I didn't care if he told them. Honestly, I wanted them to know it was me who spilled everything. It's been 10 months since then. My divorce was finalized last week. I got a solid alimony settlement based on neglect, emotional distress, and endangerment during pregnancy. I also received my share of the house since I contributed to its purchase. I gave Andrew a 3-month deadline to buy me out, or the house goes to auction. On top of that, I get child support for both kids. Shortly after I talked to my ex-brother-in-law, I received angry messages from my sister-in-law blaming me for ruining her life. Later, I found out that her husband had looked into her family, and the truth came out. They weren't rich at all, as they'd claimed. She had lied about many things, including her job. Some gossip-loving relatives told me the Scotts sent Andrew's sister back home and filed for divorce. She was accused of stealing. Turns out she had been taking money from her in-laws' safe and wiring it to her mother. Her husband called her a gold digger too, saying she had swindled him out of thousands of dollars while they were dating. Now I sit back and sip my wine, enjoying these little bits of gossip and wishing this lovely trio, my ex, my former mother-in-law, and that fraud of a sister-in-law, a joyful life in well-deserved poverty.